Welcome to the first of 4 videos looking at setting up a login registration system using PHP and using a hashed password system to encrypt the passwords in a database. So let's just show you where we're going to end up with this. So we've got a login form here. There's a page here that I would like to restrict access to. So when I click on this, you'll see I can't get access, it bounces me back out. Let me log in. I'll just try with an invalid user first of all, so it tells me my details are incorrect. I do have a valid user set up, so let's try this one. So that does allow me to log in. You can see I'm inside of this page now. If I went back to the login page itself, I can click on here and I can enter that page absolutely fine, and you see I can also log out. I could register a new user, so we had John, let's have Jane at gmail.com, password of test as well. We need to confirm the password and then we can register. So let's try logging in now as Jane, so Jane at gmail.com, and then test was our password and log in and see if we've got the same system working there. So that's what we're going to build. So the first thing that we need to consider is encryption. So let's look at how we can encrypt passwords using PHP's password hash and verify password methods. So for our login and registration system, we're going to be hashing our password. We're going to be converting the user password into an encrypted value, and we're going to be using a one-way encryption technique known as password hash, which is a PHP method. So this will take a password which our user will provide us when they register, or indeed when they try to log in, and that password will then get hashed into a string, which will then store in our database. We'll then retrieve that value from our database later on if we want to verify the password, because we can run the password through password verify. So this is the password in plain text, where you can compare it against the hash to see whether the password matches or not. So there is, once the password is hashed, there is no way, unless we knew the password, that we can retrieve that value, even if we do have access to the database. So let's show you how this works. So in the files for this lab, there's a process folder, and inside there there's a file called create account. We're going to use this to seed an account in our database in a second. You can see I've just declared a variable there called password, and that is then fed in as a parameter into our password hash method. And the second parameter is the encryption algorithm we're going to use. We're using something called cryptblowfish to encrypt that value, which will give us a 60-character hash encryption of the password. And also we can echo out the hash password of this password. So let's show you what that would look like in the browser. And there it is. There's our 60-character hash password. And you'll see that this, if I refresh the page, that becomes, although the password is the same, it becomes a different hash. So it's properly hashing that using the one-way encryption technique. So, given I've got a hash there now, what I'm going to do in my PHP MyAdmin, I'm going to create a table to hold my login credentials. So we're going to create a users table in PHP MyAdmin. So let's create a users table, which is going to have 4 columns. And these are outlined here. So we've got a user ID. That's going to be an integer. We'll give it 11 characters of length, and we'll auto increment it. So click AI. I'll make that our primary key. And then we'll have our user login. That's going to be an email address in our application, so we'll give that a varchar of 50 characters, and then we'll have a user password, and we'll say that that's going to be a varchar again. Now that's going to be a hash, so that's going to be this kind of length, so I'll allocate plenty of space for that. It's going to be 60 max, but let's give it a little extra space, 255 to be on the safe side. And then we've got a user rights field, which you could potentially use to give different access rights to different people. Perhaps we'll give that a default value as defined of 0. And let's make our user login as well. Let's make that unique so that we can't, so that each user has a unique email address. Right, so if we save that. Another thing with the database is that we do want to make sure that our login and password are case sensitive. So on that basis, what we're going to do is change the collation type for the username and the password. So I'll change both of those from the default of Latin, Swedish, case insensitive, which is the CI there. So I'm going to change those. It needs to be UTF-8 bin. So there's no CI extension there to indicate it's case sensitive. So UTF-8 bin. Let's save that and user login, and then do the same for user password. So change this to UTF-8 bin. So our password and our username are now case sensitive. We've then got our users table here. So let's populate that. So let's insert a value. So we could put in john@gmail.com. Let's put in their hash password, which we were generating. Let's put in our hash password. So we'll populate that into here, and then let's last few characters there, JSQ6, just make sure those get saved. So hit go on that, and if we browse, we can see we've got our username, we've got our password. If we just edit that, there's JSQ6, so it has kept that length of that hash in there. So let's just show you how this password verify works then, because we've currently got a hash of our password here. So how can we check that what that password is? I'll say it's one-way encryption, so you do need to know the password. So here's a little file I've created. So that's the hash of the password. It's slightly artificial, this example, it's only to prove a point, but that's why I've had to put single inverted commas around this, because the dollars would cause it to problems thinking it was a variable. So that's our hash, that's the password that we are saying we think it is, and we could run these two then through password verify. There's our password, there's our hash, and it should echo either valid or invalid. So when I test that on the server, you can see that I get valid. So if someone did try to put some other kind of password in there to try and verify that against it, it will return false. Let's just check that for you quickly. So on the server, if we refresh, that should now be invalid. So we're going to be using password hash to register our users. So once we've created an account like this, you can delete this file. It's just to seed the database. But we are going to use logic like this, password verify, in order to verify the user input that's going to come from a login form against the hash value that we get from the database.